Hello, and welcome to Understanding Politics. My name is Daniel, and this is my first YouTube channel and video. I love using YouTube to learn about politics in the world, and I just want to contribute to that a little bit. I hope this will be useful to students, but also anyone who's interested in politics. So I'll just jump ahead to the first topic. Today, I'll be talking about populism, and specifically some problems with how it is used in the media. Well, it isn't a useless concept, it is increasingly being used to smooth over important differences between political actors, and I think this has become damaging to our discourse around politics and extremism. The context of this is best shown by The Guardian's new populism project, which has completed the transformation of populism from being an academic term to a media buzzword. That said, they do have academics from the very good comparative populism project involved. However, as it's transferred into the mainstream media, I think the concept has become dangerously diluted. So if we look at this infographic, we can see how The Guardian has mapped out various politicians on this spectrum. The populist group includes both left populists like Bernie Sanders and right populists like Trump and Viktor Orban. Now, there are good reasons to class these diverse actors as populist while emphasising the difference between the left and the right groups. However, lumping them in together arguably makes the term a little confusing. Furthermore, when people talk about populism, the focus is on these guys on the far right, because on the substantive policy issues that many people find worrying, this is where the problem lies. For example, anti-immigrant sentiments or authoritarian tendencies are pretty much exclusively the purvey of these groups on the right. So what is populism? Cass Moody, who is probably the foremost writer on the issue, describes it as a thin ideology, which means that it has a pretty weak and malleable policy platform. The focus is instead on the communication and discourse style. This is characterised by a series of tropes, the most important of which is the idea of the pure people versus the corrupt elite. For people like Sanders or Corbyn, the corrupt elite would be the banks, corporations, and vested economic interest. For Salvini or Farage, it would be the EU, and for Trump, it would be global liberals and the Washington elite. But one key difference is that right-wing populists combine their attacks on a corrupt elite with the marginalisation of vulnerable groups within society. Trump doesn't just rage against the liberal Washington elite, but he also demonises refugees and Muslims. This is a key difference which the term populism on its own fails to capture. Okay, so if populism can be seen as style rather than substance, let's look at what that style is. It is often harsh and divisive in its language, but with a certain charismatic appeal from the leader. And it also rests on the identification of a clear enemy. Think about how Trump went after his Republican rivals and then Clinton, and now is constantly picking new fights with new enemies. It also relies on direct appeals to the people, often by claiming simply to be on the side of the people, however you define that. But increasingly, this involves actually circumventing the traditional media. For example, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil did not attend the televised presidential debates and instead used Facebook Live to rally his base. New media certainly makes this easier and perhaps explains why populism seems more prevalent. The final important point is that populists are constantly trying to mobilise popular anger, and this is probably the key aspect which has made them so effective recently. If we look at Trump since he became president, he hasn't stopped campaigning and he continues to try and use his base on different issues. So, if we look at some quotes from Trump, we can see how he uses this kind of populist rhetoric. This first quote here shows how he's setting himself up as an avatar for the people, however you define that. While economically speaking, he's hardly a man of the people, in fact, he's a member of the New York elite, he sets himself up as an avatar for the general will. Now, if we look at these next quotes, we can see this phrase, drain the swamp, which is clearly an example of, again, attacking the corrupt elite, in this case, the Washington elite. And he here uses the phrase enemies of the people to set up the press as an enemy. This last one is particularly worrying as it shows his potential authoritarian tendencies. However, we can also identify similar quotes from non-populist leaders. For example, the charisma vacuum which is Michael Gove is from the archetypal technocratic establishment party, the British Conservatives. Nevertheless, he deployed this quote about not trusting experts during the Brexit campaign. While this was arguably a populist campaign, he is not what would generally be termed a populist politician. I think what this shows is that populism is a rhetorical tool which can be used by various political actors at different times, and is not actually a term which describes the contents or beliefs of a person or movement. In fact, populism has always to some extent been part of politics, with the strength of the populist feeling fluctuating over time. There has always been a need to mobilise popular energy and even popular anger to drive political change. In the post-Cold War 90s, with the apparent triumph of centrist liberalism exemplified by Tony Blair and Bill Clinton, populist rhetoric was at a low ebb. This led to the pathologisation of working class anger, as concerns around economics or immigration were dismissed as uneducated, backwards, or racist. And in some cases, these concerns were motivated by racial anxiety. But with no one addressing these issues or mobilising this anger, it created space for political entrepreneurs like Nigel Farage or Marine Le Pen to build their reactionary movements. The question therefore isn't populism versus no populism or anger versus no anger, but in how people use this anger in populism. People's understandable discontent, particularly after devastating economic collapses like what occurred in 2008, will be harnessed by someone. The question is whether it is directed towards improving the environment and the economy, or towards marginalising the vulnerable and stoking up hatred, whether this will be a race-based anger or a class-based anger, for example. And this is the ultimate problem with the current use of the term populism. It draws a moral equivalence between the hateful politics of the far right and the genuine economic discontent expressed by many others. It identifies populism as the problem rather than reactionary ideology. And as this excellent tweet from Nathan Brand shows, whose work, by the way, on the Russian far right is well worth checking out, what this tweet shows is that the focus on style over substance is insanely privileged. The problem isn't that populists are crass or aggressive and rude, it's that they pursue policies that hurt people. And for people like refugees trying to get into America right now, these problems are very, very real. Now, this tendency to use populism in this way is exemplified by a recent headline from The Guardian, who are supposed to be a left-wing publication. Here they're saying that the appointment of a far-right violent Islamophobe, Tommy Robinson, is pushing UKIP in a populist direction. The issue here isn't that UKIP is going to become more populist as a political party, but it's about them becoming far-right. If the appointment of this person is pushing them anywhere, it's to the extreme fringes of politics, not to a certain type of political communication style. So, while the concept of populism has a place, if it's going to be used to avoid identifying right-wing extremism, then this has become a problem. So, when we talk about people like Jair Bolsonaro, Viktor Orban, Donald Trump, or Rodrigo Duterte in the same breath, it is not because of the superficial fact that they are all stylistically populist. Rather, it is because they threaten violence against Indigenous people. They're misogynists. They attack freedom of the press and freedom of academia, or they have authoritarian tendencies and like cozying up to other authoritarians like Mohammed bin Salman. And if we look at the ideological lodestars behind these movements, people like Steve Bannon or Alexander Dugin, we see that they share a militaristic nationalism which is truly dangerous. Populism is really the least of our problems when it comes to people like this. So, when the media talks about people like this, yeah, sure, it can describe them as populist, but it should also describe them for what they are. Authoritarian, far-right, nationalist, neo-fascist, and white supremacist. Because ultimately, that's what worries us so much about these people. Okay, so thanks very much for watching all the way to the end. Please like, share and subscribe because I will be making more videos soon. And really the best thing you could do is to tell me what you'd like to hear more about and give me ideas, either in the comments below or directly on Twitter, which I'll put a link to in the description. Thanks a lot, guys.